The Stranded J Podcast.
So we have had 2 episodes this week of Daredevil Born Again, episodes 5 and 6. So we are going to have a little bit of a discussion on those 2 episodes. Sorry it's so late. We always have to watch Daredevil after we put Harper down, and that's a little bit after it premieres, so we have to start it a little bit later. And then we had 2 episodes, so double whammy this week. And we're going to just jump right into the discussion. So the first episode, we see basically we'll talk about it in a little bit here, but it's a bit of a filler episode where we see Matt Murdock going to try to find a way to get a loan for his lawyering, and essentially there's a bank robbery, and it's a whole story of Matt kind of thwarting the bank robbery without becoming Daredevil, and it's very like kind of like finding a clever way to stop them without anything really crazy coming from him and being put on him. They got a hostage situation. Kamala's uncle is in it, which I'm not super familiar with, but I remember the actor from the movies, and he kind of crosses over, and he's kind of like a partner to Matt in the bank while there's this bank robbery on St. Patrick's Day going on. So we just see a lot of kind of ins and outs of Matt solving this, like I said, without his, suit. And it's a very different kind of, like I said, it's kind of like a filler episode. It doesn't really fill in a lot with the ongoing overarching story. So Trisha, I know you had a lot to say about this episode, so go ahead and get started.
I don't think I really had anything to say about this episode. I think it could have been cut completely. That being said, I didn't dislike the episode. It was a filler episode for sure. But I think that the only thing we really gained from that was seeing, if you watched The Marvels, right?
Yeah, and Miss Marvel, the TV show.
If you watched those, you saw a familiar face. But other than that, I think that the only thing established in that episode was the head, not investigator, but just someone else that was on the police force.
Yeah, because she shows up in the next episode too.
Yeah.
And I don't remember her appearing anywhere else. What I'll say about this episode is I agree with you. I think it could have been cut. However, and I thought it was, kind of just, it could have just been thrown out. There just wasn't much to it. However, from a comic book perspective and a comic book fan perspective, it was kind of fun to see. This was like an episode that was ripped right out of like a single issue of Mark Waid's run of Daredevil in my eyes. And for people who haven't read Mark Waid's run on Daredevil, essentially he makes Matt he takes him back to how he was in the 60s before Frank Miller came in and kind of reinvented him as a more of a dark, brooding, conflicted hero. And he was more of like a swashbuckling kind of, used his blindness as a lawyer to get, to his advantage in that way, where he seemed very helpless and meek, and it got him through some of the danger and stuff like that. And Mark Waid's run is just like a modernized version of the 60s stuff so he kind of has a good meld of like his history in the past of having his dark brooding stuff, and it's still a dark story in Mark Waid's run, but it has just this kind of lighter tone to it throughout, and it's more of a superhero comic book, if you know what I mean, as opposed to like a film noir detective kind of what's the out of the suit stuff's more interesting than in the suit stuff. So it was actually really fun to see that, especially with like Charlie Cox portraying that. And it is also a big problem with this show so far is there's like no set tone that kind of follows throughout every episode. Each episode feels like it feels a little bit different. So this one wasn't, it was the same thing where it just felt like just a little out of nowhere. And I feel like the characters were written a little differently and they came from a different universe almost at times. So that's where I'm like, I didn't love that episode for that reason, but I did also like kind of the homages that they were giving and giving you a different side to the character, if that makes sense.
I think that's something else that you pointed out that is kind of a cool Easter egg in this relatively throwaway episode, in my opinion, is Matt Murdock. At the beginning of it, he establishes that he's Irish, and they were the bank robbers were also Irish, kind of giving him some grief. And later on, he uses an Irish accent to impersonate one of them. And if you didn't read the comics and you weren't like a huge Daredevil fan, you probably would have just assumed, he's Irish, so he probably can do an Irish accent just kind of naturally. But I liked that you said that was kind of true to the comics.
Yeah, so like the one thing that we haven't really seen a lot of with Matt, in whether it's the Netflix show or in Born Again with Disney Plus, is Matt, it makes sense. His powers, with his heightened senses, he has a really good ear. And so since he has a really good ear, he can pick up a violin and like play it because he just has such a heightened sense. He just knows what sounds right and what sounds wrong so well that he can kind of just like by ear play anything or sing anything or do anything in that way. So it makes sense that with his voice as well, he can kind of mimic accents and mimic people's voices and things because that's just something he hears all the time. And it's he's just very pitch perfect with everything. So to be able to like call he's talking on the radio to the other robbers as one of the robbers in an Irish accent, it makes a lot of sense. And it's something we haven't seen yet in the TV show, which I thought was cool.
I thought so too.
Also we got a little bit of just like Matt, like I said, I kind of said it before. He's just like a little more. He plays the aloof right when he needs to, and then he plays kind of the cocky right when he needs to. And we saw a lot of that in that episode, which is also kind of fun. And he got to obviously find ways to like pull a guy into a corner and beat the crap out of him and move on. The one other criticism I have to give is I kind of made a note of it, but I remember what I was going to say is. Disney Plus and Disney in general are kind of like those kids who are kind of the preppy kids who just learned how to cuss and they think they know like how to naturally do it and be just as like be one of the cool kids that cusses all the time. Like they do drop F-bombs in this episode, which they've done in the past, but it just felt so forced. Like, oh, well, Daredevil, yeah, like as Disney, they're like, well, Daredevil, yeah, we watched the Netflix show and it's super edgy and dark and stuff, so throw an F-bomb in here and throw an F-bomb in there, but it just doesn't feel as natural or like part of the world as it normally would, just because they just don't, they just don't know how to deliver that, I don't think, as well. It's like people who like cover Nirvana that are like, nothing, they're like not grungy people at all or don't even like play grungy music ever, but they cover it. Like it's kind of that same feel.
I could cover Nirvana, I think.
Yeah, it'd be like Trisha covering Nirvana. It'd be super weird.
I'm gonna sing Nirvana on Saturday now.
Especially like if you like do it in your own style. Like it sticks out. So yeah, that episode, not too much to talk about, I guess. I could go with or without it. It was very much, we said, an anime filler episode. Like you're in the middle of this kind of serious, dark, epic arc, and the next episode is filler, and it's just like this, let's go, that's like what happens if let's go to a restaurant and eat, and it's just hijinks with that. It kind of feels like that, where it's just like a very odd, lighthearted filler. Even though there were stakes, it's not the same. So I could have done with or without it. However, for the comic book in me, nerd in me, I thought it was kind of fun. Had me on edge the whole time. I was waiting for Daredevil to arrive. I know, and that was the other thing, is kind of figuring out when is he gonna show up in the suit again. And you knew it was getting close. Which leads us into the second episode. And I also said this too. There's a reason that they had, there's a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons I could tell they had 2 episodes in one night was because I think they would get a lot of flack if one episode was just that bank episode and they just kind of moved on. There'd be a lot, the next morning, there'd be a lot of people super upset about that. And because it doesn't progress any of the overarching plot or anything like that. So, I could see that I could see Twitter blowing up right now, just like super disappointed. And I think it was a little bit easier to watch, knowing there's another episode after that. So going into the second episode is kind of where everything kind of progresses, we finally get Muse, who they've been talking about and has been hinted since the first episode. And then we see him appear at the end of last week's episode. This kind of brings him in full force. You have kind of yet again this mirror between Fisk and Matt, where we're seeing them naturally and kind of quickly regress, if you want to call it that, to what they always have been. So for Fisk, that would be a criminal, and for Matt, it would be a vigilante. I thought that aspect of it was a little too forced this episode. I thought the mirrors were a little too obvious. They were doing a better job throughout the last few episodes. It was like a minor nitpick for me, but it just felt by the end a little too like, see guys, they're going back to the same sea, and like, okay, yeah, we get it. But the story part of it was good. I liked this episode a lot. I loved that it felt a little bit more like the Netflix show. And I thought that the pacing of it was pretty good. I thought that we just like bringing up a couple of the negatives. Like I thought Vanessa was oddly herself again, if that makes sense, where she's been so upset with Fisk over the past, season. And they were like on the verge of divorce and going through counseling and stuff. In this episode, she was much more supportive. And I think it's partially intentional with the idea that she sees Fisk as kind of regressing back to his criminal ways, and she likes that. However, it just felt very odd for her as a character because, she's been so bitter with him and hardly wants to be around him. And now she's super supportive and loving. So yeah, Walking Dead did the filler episodes at times. They did have a couple of those as well, where you're like, oh, you can tell they're just trying to fill in this runtime and fill the episode in for the week, and they didn't really want to progress it this quickly. What did you think of the second episode tonight, Trisha?
I liked it. Actually, it was probably one of my favorite ones. I know that especially when they do series, a lot of the costumes can kind of be a little cheaper. And I think that the costumes look great. In fact, Muse looks so good. Like probably looks the best out of any villain I've ever seen.
Which is funny because he's like such a like crude,
simple,
like crudely made costume.
I think that's why I like it, is because like if you
were,
that's one thing I've always had an issue with, and it's not their fault, like it's from comic books, but anytime I see like for example Green Goblin, I'm like, bro, like where did you get that? I've always felt that way. So I know like the when you see Peter Parker initially come in as the human spider to that boxing ring, and it's just like so crudely thrown on, I'm like, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. And then when we see Tom Holland's Peter Parker for the very first time when Iron Man is approaching him, it makes total sense that it's just like a hoodie basically, right. Until he gives him his suit. So I do like the thought of having something like a burlap face mask, essentially. Just something really simple. And that's another thing I really liked. I mean, I like Cillian Murphy anyways, but when he was Scarecrow, I thought that was a really cool way of showing him as Scarecrow in the Dark Knight series. Yeah. Sorry, I'm going all over the place. All that to say, I really liked his costume. I really like I really liked the episode as a whole. I do agree with you. I don't like when movies or TV shows are a little too on the nose when it comes to what the points that they want to get across. The thing that I love about television is that the subtlety can be, it can be even just like a slight movement of your eye, and it's like, oh, I know exactly what she was thinking there if your actors are good. And so we don't need you to paint us a picture that clearly. Just point us in the direction of what you want us to see.
And we're already kind of seeing that throughout the whole series. It's just everything gets kind of popped off with, after obviously Foggy's death and a year goes goes by, that like Fisk is out of prison and he's now running for mayor, and Matt is doing really well as a lawyer and he's no longer Daredevil. And those are very different versions of those people that we know for 3 seasons and if not more through all the other tie-ins and stuff, to see them in such a different position. And they acknowledge that in the diner scene. And then the story starts to progress and you get this visual throughout, which I always thought was a little obvious because they did it already in the Netflix series, especially in the first season. It was really subtle. But in this, it's still pretty on the nose, where it's like one for one, like here's a scene of Fisk becoming more like Fisk and here's a scene of Matt becoming more like Matt, but they were more spread out. So it was still pretty subtle. And this was just the first episode. I felt like it was like, okay, we get it. Like they are coming back to being who they are, and that's going to eventually lead to them having to acknowledge that. But the other spoiler of this episode is we see Matt back in the suit as Daredevil. And that was really exciting. The one thing I'm not so sure on, and it's not a criticism at all, it actually worked out really well, is just, I don't know if this was a reshot choice, like with the new writers and the new directing team, or if it was something that was already planned, because I do know that he was supposed to not be in the suit for quite a few episodes until the very end. This was episode 6. So I don't know. I don't know if this was one that they added in. I don't know if Muse is part of it or not, but what I will say is Matt basically goes to confront Muse in his hideout, and that fight scene was what I was wanting out of the fight scene in the first episode at the very beginning. It was very like real, well lit, well choreographed, tight corridors, well paced. And it was like exactly what I wanted. Like the
lighting was also really good. There was a moment where Muse steps out and he's in like the underground tunnels, like basically a subway. I don't know, space.
The place Lex Luthor hid in the Christopher Reeve Superman movies, essentially. It's like the little areas away, like tucked away out, right, like maintenance areas outside of the subway.
Exactly. So he's looking out as a train is going by, and the reflection of the train's backlights in his eyes were it looked so cool.
Yeah,
I loved it.
And it felt honestly like, at first I got nervous because like, is this going to be like a rushed Muse story where it's like this all just comes to a head here and like Matt captures him and this is what makes him suit up again and stay Daredevil again and everything, but Muse gets away, which makes me happy because I think there's more story to be told there, and he just got introduced, so that's exciting. I will admit, I think I said this last week, but I knew nothing about Muse. I'm in the midst of reading that Charles Soule Daredevil run, and so I had no idea about that character. I was a little off on what my predictions were of it, and I think his character is really interesting and cool. I'm not saying I didn't think it was going to be cool, but like I thought he was going to be more, like I said, like a Professor Pig from Batman, where he's like performing art on his subjects when he's really using the subjects to make his art. So the whole murals going around that are hard to wash off because they are made out of people's blood, like that's very creepy and kind of cool to watch. And I guess the only plot hole, and I guess it's similar to where like we asked, like, how did Matt find Punisher in his hideout? I didn't really know how Matt just was like, well, because White Tiger's niece, she is out searching for these missing people, and she gets caught by Muse, and then her mom calls Matt, and Matt is like, this is where he finally decides, I'm going to become Daredevil again. I'm going to fight her because I can do it faster, and I don't want her to die. And so he suits up, and you get like a cool shot of him running on the rooftops, and it actually looks good this time for the most part. But like the one thing I didn't quite know is he's like, okay, screw it, and he like leaves. And then all of a sudden he just instantly is there and he finds Muse. It takes him, like, they don't explain how, like what led to the path. And I think what you're supposed to assume is kind of like with Punisher, where he kind of just sniffs his way like a bloodhound and like uses his senses to kind of track him down. But I did think that was a little bit of a plot hole. They should have had maybe a little bit more explanation as to how he tracked him down, because he didn't even know who Muse was until the scene before. And he's being told by his buddy cop that, it's that there's a serial killer out there named Muse and he's doing these things. And so I thought that was a little... And
he doesn't talk.
Is that part of it?
And she didn't scream. Yeah, that's a good point. There was no sound where it's like, oh, he must have heard the screaming.
Is that, though, because it did go fast, is that the moment, though, when he's getting the call from her mom or whomever. He's on the computer researching. Is he researching Muse? Like the stuff? I can't remember what he was looking at.
I don't remember, but I mean, it certainly wasn't like, and here is where Muse hides out.
Yeah, but that's like how Punisher was, where it's just like he kind of just finds him. So that was interesting. I can let that slide because it's such a good scene to see like him come in and they play the theme, and I think the costume looks really good.
I was going to ask you about the costume because it's more red than it was more maroon in the original series, and now it's pretty like scarlet red.
Yeah, and I think this one was like when in the first scene of the first episode, it was too red, and I think this is technically supposed to be a different costume, but I think it's the same one that they used, and they lit it better. So that's what I was looking for in the first episode, where they made it more red so it pops, but you don't just like have him out in broad daylight in that costume because then it'll look cheap and too red. So I think they did a good job in this balancing that lighting to make it look, he looks like the comic book Daredevil, because that Daredevil, he's all cast in shadow. So you get kind of like a darker muted red that's like outlined in bright red. From lighting, and if you like, and during the day he's bright red, and it looks okay in a comic book, but in this it would look funky. So I'm glad they did that. I like the lenses more. It's kind of a minor thing, but like the lenses that they used in the Netflix series are really small and they worked fine, but they didn't really pop out much. And the lenses look like they're almost glowing a little bit, which is cool because in the comics his red eyes are kind of prominent. So that was fun too. But yeah, I loved that episode overall. You got a lot of, obviously, so you have Matt fighting Muse, and then you had Fisk with, gosh, what was his name? The cheater guy that he had in his dungeon. Adam. Yeah, that's right.
Don't ask me names because I confused Kirsten for Heather.
Yeah.
The last time.
I'm bad with names too, so I didn't even argue it. Yeah, you had, Fisk and Adam, and he, it shows them kind of letting the characters out a little bit. I like how with Matt they're doing this thing where they're giving him this like primal rage scream, kind of like while he's in the middle of fighting, just he can't control himself. And Fisk kind of has a similar thing, but that's where I thought the mirrors were a little too on the nose, because it was like a cut and cut and cut and cut, and like they were showing like one punch of Daredevil, one punch of Fisk, and like they're doing the same thing at the same time. We got it. Like, we know that they're mirroring, they're reverting to what they once were. But it was cool overall. And I'm happy to see him back in the suit, because as much as I'm totally fine with a Daredevil that is a lot of Matt Murdock, because I love the character, I want to see some Daredevil too. And it was fun to get a good fight scene in the costume and all that. That was a lot of fun. I
don't know, man. I think Matt Murdock has gotten very attractive in this series.
Well, he's very much like a comic book, where he's a little cocky here and there. He uses his disability to his advantage, and like that's very comic book Matt Murdock. It was interesting that Matt went back to the religious aspect before he became Daredevil again. Trish and I were kind of arguing about this during the episode, where, well, I'll start with my point of view, I guess, and then you can kind of. Well, if you want to start, it'd actually be easier for me to explain after you explain how you felt about it.
No, because I don't like doing that, because every time I have a gripe with it, you go, well, that's comic accurate. So. Well,
that's why I said I'd go first, because then you can rebuttal to me.
Fine.
I thought, and it was funny because because he started like reciting parts from the Bible, and I said, well, he's been kind of repressing his religion, because it's when he's embracing his religion, he's having to move forward and like grieve for Foggy and kind of move on with his life that he doesn't want to move on from. And so that's why I said this a few episodes ago, that like we didn't see a lot of that, because he is repressing his religion, because he's trying to stay stagnant in just his law job, his lawyer job, and like he doesn't want to get deep with the religion stuff, because it's going to make him have to open up in a way and acknowledge his grief and how he's moved on from Daredevil on top of it. And so I said, well, and he's repressing his religion, he's also repressing Daredevil, and just like Daredevil, it's gonna come back. He's gonna have to embrace it more. So when he started doing that, I was like, oh, he's always religious, he's always a Catholic, but he's just not embracing it as much in those moments, because he doesn't want to acknowledge those things yet. And he doesn't want to move on from those things yet. And then, now that he's doing this, it's all coming back. He has the suit back, and he's also being very Mr. Catholic again. So he literally, they asked him, his girlfriend was like, oh, you still, doing that? And he's like, when I feel like it or something. I don't remember the full line, but it's basically, what I was saying, where it's just when he's ready to kind of acknowledge that. But what was your side of it?
My side of it was Matthew has always been a devout Catholic. And he, when you lose someone, or when trying times specifically, very difficult times come through your life, that is what you lean on first, is your faith and your religion, especially when it deals with death.
Oh, thank you, Jared. Good to see you.
Which is the catalyst of this. So, I didn't agree with that. I don't like that at all.
And I think that's why I like it so much, because like I said, I'm not a Catholic anymore because Foggy died, and I'm not a Catholic anymore because I'm not Daredevil. He's just acknowledging, I don't want to do that right now because I care so much about it, and I'm not in a place that I want to acknowledge it. I don't want to acknowledge that stuff. I don't want to get better. I don't want to get better right now. I'm supplementing getting better with changing my life. And so I'm now, a lawyer in a different part of New York where I don't see the things that remind me of Foggy in my old life. I'm not Daredevil anymore, so that doesn't remind me. I don't want to do anything that reminds me of that. I'm going to do everything by the book and do it to the law. And as these things are creeping back into his life, he's like, I can't help it. It's just who I am. I am a devout Catholic. I am Daredevil. I am Matt. And, that's why he takes the horn and puts it on Foggy's obituary and leaves it on the table when he becomes Daredevil again, because he's kind of trying to move on so he can be the person that he always is, that he can't hide from anymore. So that's kind of how he might have a lot to confess. Well, he always has a lot to confess. He always seems to have a lot to confess whenever he's, beating the crap out of a guy. Even Muse, I thought he was going to kill him. Every time he fights someone in this show, I think he's going to kill them, because he literally takes his batons and ties it around Muse's neck and hangs him and is sitting there pulling him. And Muse is about to go, and he just drops him right before he dies, and basically, and it's every moment, it's to the inch of the person's life.
Okay, so that leads me into two things, but we'll start with the first one, and if we never get to the second one, that's fine, because this one is definitely in line with what you just said. So I agree. It seems like every single person he fights, because he's been repressing this, he gets right to that edge where you're like, did they die? Are they okay? I guess they're still alive. That's fine. Because just like Batman, Daredevil has that line, right? He will beat the crap out of you. He will break every bone in your body. But the line is, he will not kill you. No matter how much you deserve it. He will not cross that line. So we got introduced to a character in this latest episode that I have my own problems with in this particular version, but he was from the Chip Zdarsky's run. And he is essentially this new, I believe he was the new police chief.
Yeah, in that version, I'm pretty sure. I got to reread that arc.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's the new police chief in this version, and he is by the book to a T, arrests Daredevil at one point.
He doesn't like vigilantes.
He does not like vigilantes at all. And he is straight-laced. The law has always been there for me. I am by the book. And every single time, the law is the truth and the way. And this is how we do things. And in this version, he was introduced as part of Fisk's task force in order to take down vigilantes, which is it's still in line with that previous run, except for the team that he put together were kind of dirty cops a little bit.
They were dirty cops, the worst of the worst, they said.
Yeah. So yeah, not a little bit. They were dirty cops. And so it bothers me because when this guy came in, he was straight-laced, still had a high and tight, a military fade, just very, I do everything exactly as it's supposed to be done.
What's his last name? Cole
I don't remember.
Yeah. He's still in the book. The run that I'm reading right now after Darcy's run, he's still in it. Cole, I can't remember his last name.
Hanson.
He's
Oh, wait. I think that's a guy I went to school with. Sorry.
Does he look like him?
Not at all.
Oh, okay.
He's like blonde hair, blue eyes.
Oh, I see. Yeah, what you were saying though is he's in this version he seems to be a little more of a dirty cop as opposed to straight-laced. He basically
Right.
says he killed he put the law into his own hands.
Right.
Chicago.
Which is something that the Cole from the comics never would have done.
And I need to like I said, I need to reread the Chip Zdarsky run because we were both reading it like single issue after single issue. And then I started picking up the volumes and I binged the last maybe 10, 15 issues. But the first part of it, like I was reading like monthly and it was so like I kept forgetting what was going on because it came out so slow. So I need to just read it all at once so I can kind of remember that whole thing. But I think you're right. Like it was accurate that he was a vigilante. He didn't like vigilantes, but he tried to do everything by the book because
Which is why he didn't like vigilantes, because
Yes.
he's like, you do not take the law into your own hands.
and he like spoilers for that arc, he eventually kind of works his way to understanding why Matt does what he does, and he kind of helps outside of just the book a little bit. He's not a vigilante, but he's kind of like Commissioner Gordon in that way where he's just like, I'll help you because you're making things change in a good way.
Right. But he's
so-
still very hesitant because he's kind of going through that.
We have to kind of wait and see with that. I mean, I agree with you, and they do have it wrong. If it's exactly how they're portraying it, then they do have that character and they're changing him in, I think, a worse way. However, we've only seen him in one scene, and he was making a lot of weird facial expressions, like he wasn't fully on board with all that.
I don't know, honey. I think that was just his face.
It could be. It very well could be. But I got kind of vibes that like when he was there handing out the vest and stuff, he seemed like it could be one of those like, hey, check it out, he's letting us do this. Or it could be like I don't know how I feel about this, and I'm wondering if he's not telling the full story or something. I don't know. We'll have to see. It could very well be what we think, but I also just have a hunch that maybe there's more to that and we're going to get it later down the line. Mm-hmm. I hope they do a good job with him, though, because he's a good character. I thought the actor was good, but
Yeah.
they got him kind of wrong, at least.
He had such green eyes. Did you
They
notice
looked
that?
fake.
Oh my
They looked like
gosh.
CG.
They're beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful green eyes.
He was a good actor, though. I liked
was.
him. I liked him in the part.
Okay, second question. Are you ready for this one? It's a big
Yeah.
question. Since we all know it's going to happen, and we're talking about Foggy's death and everything like that, why do you think when Foggy comes back and it comes out that he has faked his death, why would he do that? What do you think his reasons are for faking his death, and when do you think he's going to come back?
Okay. First part, I think he is faking his death just like he did in the comics because he was working a case that was really heated, and the person he was defending, it led to like it was his only way out of keeping both of them safe and keeping this going. By the end of it, he kind of pops out of it and solves the problem. This dude that he's defending kind of got into some major issues that, they were going to die if they didn't go into witness protection or something. I think it's going to be similar to that, where I think he faked his death because the guy he was on the phone with that he was defending, that he said was at his apartment, actually they knew this was going to happen. Something like this was going to happen. Someone was after them due to something that the dude he's defending was doing. And so his choice was, I'm going to fake my death and his, for that matter, and we're going to go into hiding until we get this evidence built up to be able to come back. And it's a bigger issue than we think it is.
So,
Hi, Carrie Ann. Now, before we move on, the second question you have is when. I think that'll either be the end of season 2.
Season 2?
Yeah, which is what they're filming right now. So the end of the 18 episodes that were supposed to be season 1, I think he'll be back by the end of that. If not, it'll be if they do a season 3. I just think he will be back. I do. I think that there's, especially now that Disney's kind of involved, Disney loves reactions of fans, especially passionate fans, and there's a lot of passion behind the love for Foggy, and there is just as much as if there was a response for his death, I think they want to see the response of him coming back. And I think they're counting on that to be like their big last, here you go, like let's get we want people to post their reactions on TikTok the next morning. So I do think they're really betting on that. Now I was wrong about how Matt was going to suit back up. I thought someone was going to have to die first, and that didn't happen. So I was wrong.
Yeah, it did.
What do you mean?
I mean, no one specifically died, but a serial killer killed 60 people confirmed.
Well, it was.
And he just found out about it.
It was a build. It was a lot of things that led to him deciding to come back, because it was over a matter of episodes, talking to White Tiger, what happened to White Tiger after he had done everything by the book to a degree. And he's gotten to a point now where he is out of options. He cannot do it the way he's been doing it without doing, and he's also selfish and he wants to do it again. But like he realized, like, this is where I have to be, like, after all, this is the last straw, and it's a girl I care about. I can't let her down like I let her uncle down, and all that. Do you think Foggy wants Matt to continue to be Daredevil? I don't think so.
No.
I think that's the whole arc of Foggy and Matt, is Foggy puts up with it, and then Matt always disappoints him. So, you know, Matt is give an inch, take a mile with Foggy, where I'm not going to tell Foggy, I'm going to kind of be like a bad friend. And then finally Foggy figures it out, and then they're friends about it, where he's like, I don't like it, but I get that you do it, I guess. And then as that goes on, it just leads to Foggy's life getting more screwed up because of Matt's choices. And so I think he's like always like, no, I don't want this. That's at least how I feel. And that's kind of how it is in the comics.
And the Netflix series.
Yeah, we're watching Defenders right now, and at the same time, and that's another one where there's a big discussion between him and Foggy about how Foggy's sick of him. He's kind of given up the cowl in that at the beginning of that, and how Foggy's like, no, you're doing good. Don't go back to being that. And he always does. He always will. But yeah, I think overall, it was one of my favorite episodes, because it was a good balance between, I loved the visual style of this one a little bit more. It was a lot of good Matt stuff, but it was also, we got the suit up again. We got a good fight scene at the end. Good reveal, good acting points. I think I said it last week. They were talking, someone I know was talking about, because they saw a pre-screener of the whole season. And they said episode 5 could like completely be thrown into a fire. But overall, the series progresses in a better way. Every episode seems to get stronger, and I agree with that. I don't think episode 5 necessarily needed to be thrown into a fire, because I had some fun with it for what it was. I'm really glad we got 2 episodes this week, because I probably would have been harsher on it if that was the only episode we got. I'd be like, oh, where's this going now? Like, this is not good, and everything. But it felt like a little bit of an appetizer to the story, and if you're binging it later down the line, it's probably a nice little break from what you're watching, and it gives you some fun Matt character, even if it's a little different.
Yeah.
But the 6th episode definitely felt like another step up. Like, it does feel like each episode they're throwing a little bit more in there that you're looking for and expecting. And that whole fight at the end of episode 6, I was like, that is what I've been looking for, and like the fight scene, and that's exactly what I hoped would have been the first fight. They're almost similar in a way, in how they're very like quick paced, and there's a lot of urgency to them. But this one just felt more real, and there wasn't as much CG and kind of fake filter effects, and they felt like they really were there, even if they're stunt guys. Like, it just felt more real, and so that's all I wanted. And then I thought the suit looked great, so I'm excited to see where the next episodes go, because now we're on 7, so we have 3 more episodes, 1 each week, and it's either going to be rushed, or it's going to get really good and then end and be a little disappointing because you want more.
Like on a cliffhanger?
I think it's definitely going to be on a cliffhanger. I think we're going to get we'll do that. My prediction for the end of the season is, I think the Muse stuff will get wrapped up. I think there'll be some major deaths. Mm-hmm. And I think that we're going to get the final tease. I think the final tease for the next part of the season or season 2 is going to be Bullseye. I do think that we're not done with Bullseye, and I think he's going to come back because that's a huge sore spot now for Matt, which in the comics, he's the same way. He's like, every time Matt knows Bullseye's around, it's like, that's his like trauma.
Super villain.
Yeah. So I think that's going to be another big reveal. And I think Fisk is going to have something that backs him into a corner that leads to him kind of showing his corruption a little bit. He's still going to be mayor, but I think it's going to show more of his corruption. So,
well, I think that they started hinting at that this episode, and that's something we haven't touched on yet. I really liked how Fisk he got elected mayor and he cares about the city, and he's like, I've tried so long to help the city in my own way by doing things in the dark. I am now in the light, and I'm doing things the right way as they should be done by our political system. And then he goes to that party and he realizes like, oh, these are they're in the light, but they're just all a bunch of criminals.
Yeah. And they just have more power because of their money.
Exactly.
Like the oligarchy thing.
Yep. And so I thought that was very interesting, is that he was there trying to be really diplomatic, and they were essentially, what was that line that just bitch said to him? It was something like, we get it. Right now you're the mayor, so you have a seat at the table, but we decide if you get to eat or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just remember who's feeding you. And it's like, dang.
That's the beauty of...
That was such a mean line to say to someone you don't know.
And she didn't care. I mean, she walked
And then,
away.
yeah, she didn't even give him a chance to respond. She's like, okay, well, bye.
Yeah.
Kiss, kiss.
Well, and that's the beauty of these characters, and the beauty of the version of these characters, which they even did in the Netflix series, is like everyone's a bit empathetic. Like, they don't make Fisk just a straight up villain. He is, and he does really bad things, and you want him stopped, but you also like... they give you a good insight into the frustrations of what they're dealing with when they're trying.
Mm-hmm. That's why
whether they're trying for a good or bad.
That's why Joker was so good. That movie in 2018, I think 19.
You just see them trying, and maybe they're not trying for something good, or maybe they're not doing a good job at trying, but they're trying. And when they're trying and they're getting shut down due to unfairness, that creates empathy. Mm-hmm. And so then when you get that final fight, whether it's with Daredevil and Kingpin or what have you, like they did that the same with Bullseye in the 3rd season, which I'm excited we're going to be rewatching here soon, because they give him kind of a background that's really messed up and empathetic, and he's still a bad guy, but it's kind of like in a way where you dig into the history of a killer that, they had a really rough upbringing, and this is what they went through, and you kind of see, and sometimes you don't need that. Sometimes you need the chaos of a character that you don't know anything about them, but they just are. But in a lot of ways, it's also fun to get these characters because you can care in a weird way.
Sure. So in 2020, I started binging this series Gotham, and I think around season 3, there was a new villain of that season that was brought in that I remember the first time I was watching Gotham, it's where I lost interest in the show. And watching it this time around, it was because the villain would say things like, I love you, you're so evil. And it was just, not only was that corny, but also it was like, that's not empathetic to me at all. You're not building empathy with anyone, because no evil person, well, maybe one or two of them, but like nobody that you want to watch or like listen to their story thinks that they're a bad guy, right? Like all of the evil people in the world can justify their actions in some way or another. Like they don't see themselves that way. So it was really hard to hear like, you're so evil. I love that you're my niece because you have the evil blood in you and it must be a gene. I don't know. It was written about that good. Or about that well. So it was just one of those things that it's really nice to see like you said, Fisk is not a good guy, but you feel for him because of his upbringing, and like he just wants to have a normal, happy relationship, and he cares about his city. And that's why there are so many similarities between him and Matt, because they both care about their city so much. They had different upbringings.
And I think they both have some flawed ideals. Like, you know, it isn't right to be a vigilante as much as it's exciting. And I do get why a lot of people would want to do that. But like, you know, Matt, you know, he's not doing what his dad wanted him to do. He wanted him to be a lawyer and follow everything by the book and make money and be successful. And, you know, along with the Catholicism and stuff, like he's doing a lot of things that he has a really kind of warped way of the world that makes him do that. Then you have different degrees of it. So Matt isn't so bad because most of the time he's doing the right thing, and he's, you know, he maybe go a little too far with it, but he doesn't kill anyone. Then you go to like the Punisher, and you have someone that's like, you know, his complications. And then you go into the level of like a Fisk. All of them have had something that have kind of warped their perspective on the world, and they respond accordingly. And I don't think any of them are 100% correct, but none of them are 100% wrong either. But, you know, you get to Fisk and it's like, no, you don't cut their heads off with a car door. Like you don't kill and blow up city blocks and kill innocent people because you want to rebirth the city for the right things. It's the same thing as Thanos.
You gotta crack a few eggs.
But like, that's what, like, Joker's a good example, because you have two different kind of ideas of the Joker that were both very successful Oscar-winning performances, which is Heath Ledger's and you have Joaquin Phoenix's. And in, you know, the Joker, you get that kind of Fisk idea where it's like, this is what makes him who he is. And, you know, there's that whole thing, he may not be the real Joker, but beyond that, it's just like, this is what, you know, he's not right, but you understand how he, you know, the system failed him, and the system failed him to the point where he pushed back, and it didn't lead anywhere good for him, but you see why he got led there. In The Dark Knight with Heath Ledger, I liked that concept of, we have no idea why he is the way he is. And that's my favorite Joker personally, but there's a lot of different people who think differently. But like, I love the idea of he is just chaos, and he will give you a reason, and you'll go, oh, that's why he's the Joker. And then the next time you see him again, he'll give you a different reason. And none of it makes sense. None of it. He's like, there's that quote, I think it's from Killing Joke. And he's like, what's the fun of, I don't remember the full quote, but it's basically, what's the point of a story if you don't have the option of multiple choice? And so basically he's saying, you know, I just like to change it up each time. And I like having different, like, I come up with, ooh, this is kind of a sob story. Let me say this. And so it's funny how, you know, you can do that right in different ways. You can have the empathetic villain that is still a villain and how they got there. And then you can kind of have the one that's just pure chaos. But either of them, if you write them poorly, they both will fall very flat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You just know Fisk wanted to put him through the floor and had to hold back.
Oh yeah, she's talking about the mob guy in the tracksuit at the end of I think it was the beginning of episode 6.
Yeah, he wasn't in 5.
Yeah, 5 was truly like a filler to the core. You could throw that episode out and no one would know. Yeah,
I think the only thing that transferred over is, I think they kind of mention what he did and how, like, they mentioned like he was wow, I can't believe you got through that. And then the police officer that was kind of working through the hostage situation, she reappears, and I liked her,
but like
too.
as an extra, like she was just in
she
the
just
room.
stood in the room with Fisk. But I liked her as an actress in that episode. I thought she did a good job as well. And Trisha said the right thing too. They came out with that episode a week late because St. Patrick's Day was a week ago. But it was fun nevertheless.
Sweet, I got it.
What?
The little heart me.
Oh, did you?
I did.
I didn't see it. I'm sorry. But thank you, Sierra. Does anybody have any questions or anything they wanted to mention?
Yeah, anything in the episodes that we maybe missed?
Yeah. I will say I don't know a lot about Kamala, Miss Marvel. The character. I know just what she's been in crossovers with other characters in the comics. I know her origin just because of other things. I haven't seen the series and I haven't seen the Marvels, but that's an interesting take to have like an appearance of another character. I thought out of all of the side characters or characters that they've introduced in the MCU, I thought that was a random one, but also I thought it was kind of fun.
I thought it was kind of forced. I don't like that. And I don't like also, and this is such a Marvel thing to do, like Disney's Marvel, where they like to make jokes where it's like, oh, this is our world. So there are a bunch of things like, for example, the Funko Pop, where she's like, oh yeah, look, I have a Miss Marvel Funko Pop. But like, that is not our world. We don't have superheroes. We don't have that stuff. So I don't like when they try to force stuff from our world into that world, even though obviously like we have New York City, Hell's Kitchen, like all those things, that's fine. But I like to keep them very separate. Like I don't want them to talk about current events or like the president of the United States, you know what I mean? Like the mayor of New York City is not Fisk. So obviously it's not our same world. So
they kind of dip into both because like, for instance, the president of the United States up until Captain America was Thunderbolt Ross. So technically Harrison Ford or William Hurt before he passed away, Red Hulk. So they do have like fictional leaders, but sometimes they do bring in like kind of like a break the fourth wall kind of thing, which is interesting. I saw you posted a YouTube collab the other day, but there is no sound.
Oh, you're kidding. We'll look into it.
Yeah, we'll look at it. I thought I listened to it over and it sounded fine, but we'll double check that. It's also on Spotify if you want to listen to it, and all the other streaming platforms. So try that too. Do you think there will be a Kingpin versus Daredevil as soon as this season, or in another season? I think it'll be at the end of the next season. They may have some kind of cross, but I think it's going to be
That'd be way too fast.
I think it's going to be more Muse. I think the Mayor Fisk thing's going to last a while.
I agree. Well, and we only have 3 episodes left of this first season, and I think it's going to take those 3 episodes to focus on Muse, defeat Muse, bring back Bullseye, or have that tension rise again where like Matt is back as Daredevil and essentially Mayor Fisk is back as Kingpin, and they go at each other.
Yeah, I think it's going to be mostly Muse. And then I think it's going to end with a lot of hints to where the next season's going.
With like the Vigilante Task Force.
I think you're going to see a lot with the Vigilante Task Force. I think you're going to get more Punisher. I think you're going to get more where it's going for Matt, where it's going for Fisk, where it's going for Vanessa, where it's going for his aide, James Gandolfini's son. I think you're going to get more insight of where his character is going to go, and you're going to kind of either see he dies, or you're going to see, oh, he's becoming something, and we're going to see more of that next season. I just don't know. I think Punisher will come back. I think he'll come back by the end. I think he'll be back by the end of the season, and I think he's going to have some action.
That was my other question. So Chip Zdarsky's run. Do you think Matt will kill Muse? Because all of the people he has been so with your predictions and my predictions, I'm gonna make another prediction. So what if it goes this way, right? Humor me. He's met Muse, he almost killed him. The reason he didn't is because he had a chance to save I don't remember her name.
White Tiger's niece, but I can't remember her name. Yeah.
He had a chance to save her. He heard her heartbeat going out. It kind of snapped him out of it. So he's already back in the suit. So that won't be the big reveal at the end of the season. But you had said that we don't know. Muse's real identity hasn't been. We don't know who he is. But you are suspicious that it is the person that went up to Heather at her book signing and said, hey, do you have room for one more patient? You think that might be Muse?
Yeah.
I think episode 3.
They haven't acknowledged him.
No.
I think it was like episode 2.
Yeah, it was
they
early.
They haven't acknowledged that guy since. Now, it's hard with this series because it has gone through reshoots and a change in creative minds. It's like really hard for me to predict where this will go because it could go many ways in the sense of like they may wrap up the Muse stuff by the end of this season, or maybe they'll kind of halfway wrap it up, but he's still out there. Or and then we'll see a bigger situation where maybe Fisk uses him against Matt in the next season or the season after, or Bullseye comes in and they work together. You know, there's a lot of ways they could go with it. If I were guessing, I would say that, yeah, it'll lead to Muse's story wrapping up at the end of this. But when it comes to Matt killing, I'm getting that hint too, that like because of the Foggy situation, he's not as controlled.
Which was the whole catalyst that started the Chip Zdarsky run. Is that Matt was being too brutal and he accidentally took it too far.
Yes. And there's a whole story arc that goes into that. And then, you know, the other stuff that's been rumored is Shadowland, which I don't know if they're going to fully do Shadowland. I think they're going to do something similar to how they've been doing with this season, where it's like kind of its own thing, but they take parts of arcs. So the Mayor Fisk stuff or some stuff from Born Again or just some stuff from Chip Zdarsky's run. And I think they're going to do something where maybe that could be... I'm getting rumors that he's going to wear the black costume, which isn't the black costume from the first season or the third season. It's a Daredevil, full-on Daredevil armored suit that is black with red Ds. And that whole arc is a little different than I think where they'll go because it involves the hand, and I just don't think they're going to introduce them again. But I do wonder if that'll be his, like, I killed someone, so now I need to change my look and atone for my sins or something. I don't know. They could do so. He's so dramatic, Matt. Like you could do something like that.
Bless him.
But I would not be shocked if here soon he does unintentionally kill someone, because he always puts them so close to the edge of dying, just like pretty much paralyzed, that I think he's going to do it one too many out of emotion through something. And that the next season will kind of be a catalyst to that, how he deals with that. Just looking at the comments.
Do we think the Punisher will come back?
Yeah, like I said, I think he'll come back in this season. He may come back in the next, I don't know, but I think he'll come back in this season and there'll be some kind of action with him. I don't think they just brought him in for that one stuff. One. I think because that was a reshot scene with him in the last episode. I think they'll bring him back in episode 8 or 9 because those are the fully reshot or fully created episodes with a new creative team, and I think they'll have him in there somewhere fighting in the final part.
Yeah, I do like this creative team that was in charge of the rewrites. I think that, I mean, if I had to come into a series that was completely finished and rewrite half of it and scrap some of it but make some of it make sense because you didn't have the budget to redo the whole thing, I mean, that's a really difficult ask. And that last episode, that could have been the Netflix series. I mean, like, it was on par.
Yeah,
it was just as good.
It's hard. I think I always go back to the Justice League film between the Snyder cut and the Whedon cut, where that's a whole other story for another time that we can talk about. But you look at it, and obviously Joss Whedon's version was completely botched and like horrible, all things considered. And then you watch Zack Snyder's version that's 4 hours long, and he started from scratch this idea that he wanted to, continue from his other movies and all that. And it's much better because it's a more focused, intentional movie. But with Joss Whedon stuff, I can't just sit there and completely knock it, because they brought him in and they said, take what he's made and turn it into this. We want it lighter. We want it more like the Avengers. While that was the wrong choice and why that wasn't the best approach, you see why that can be an issue. So I can't fault the new creators for that first episode where they added all that stuff in that didn't look great, because they had to work, like you said, with what they've been given. And in the Snyder cut, you can see that too, where if Joss Whedon started from scratch and made a Justice League movie, it probably would have been better than the movie he made, because he got to actually shoot things he wanted to do with the budget he had and stuff. So I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. I still don't think we've fully seen what they can do. So I'm excited for that.
One thing that keeps bothering me, because I know that it's, again, we've already talked about it in this live, and it's something that everyone online is pretty much in agreement. Foggy is going to come back. He is, and everyone thinks he faked his death. The one problem I have with that theory is when you're faking your own death, you don't go to Bullseye and go, "Can you help me fake my death, Bullseye?" So I'm just very interested in how they're going to spin that, because there's no way that Foggy asked Bullseye for a favor.
No, I don't think it was that. I think that I think it's one of those situations where he knew something was going to happen, but he didn't know who was going to do it or who was going to be involved or how it was going to fully happen. I think it was just one of those things. It could even be one of those things, where maybe that wasn't the plan, but it turned into the plan, where, he...
Like, you think he actually got shot and then...
Yeah, he actually got shot. And maybe he actually was dying, and like Bucky or something, someone took Foggy for a new, they had an intention with that. Maybe the guy he was representing or something. Or it could just be he just kind of had some of the idea of how this was going to work. He knew someone was going to be coming after them, and he got shot and didn't really expect it to go that far, but he did survive because of something he had planned. Or, there's a lot, it's comic book. There's a lot of people argue with that, where they go, this isn't the comic books, this is a TV show, and they take it seriously. Dude, they take it seriously when they want to take it seriously, and they don't take it seriously when they don't want to take it seriously. Just watch episode 5 of Daredevil Born Again. It's all what they want to do in the moment. And what we know is that the Foggy and Karen were going to die off screen in the original version, and you weren't going to hear from them again. In this version, they have guaranteed they're bringing them back. And I know they did not bring back Foggy just for the first 5 minutes. Like, there's just no way.
And he's been confirmed for season 2.
And they go, well, he's a flashback. I really think even if he is a flashback, he's coming back because of, 1, it's happened in the comic books. 2, Disney loves to hype people, and they want to get those reactions of when Foggy does come back, and it throws people off. And 3, I just think that it makes sense in the way that they're kind of telling it. And a lot of people go, well, that ruins Matt's arc, because Matt's arc is his reborn out of, grief and loss. Well, that happened in the comic books too. And he still had to deal with those things, even though it wasn't quite true to be what it was. From what I remember, did Matt actually kill the guy in Chip Zdarsky's run?
They never say.
See, and there's
it's
because
ambiguous.
he starts to kind of atone for his sins of that. And then he starts to hear from other people that, well, I don't think it was your fault. It may not have been but it doesn't matter to him at that point. It was a challenge in his life he had to get through, regardless of what the actual fact is. And I think they may use a little bit of that too.
So one thing you did say that I think is kind of a cop-out. I really hate when people go, well, but it's comic books. I hate that. You still need to have a concrete story. Because they do the same thing with, I remember I really don't like Frozen. And because it's plot hole city, and they did a bunch of rewrites there too, because in true Disney fashion, they had this entire story, and then they wrote the music for it, and they go, oh crap, Let It Go is such a good song, that can't be a villain song. Okay, instead of this, Elsa's the villain, and Anna, she puts a curse on Anna and freezes her heart, and we're going to make her sisters, and now she's just misunderstood, and they had to flip the whole thing on its head. And so there are a bunch of, it's like Swiss cheese, very, very plot holes, and people are like, it's a kid's movie. She shoots magic out of her fingertips. Can you extend your disbelief a little bit? Suspend it. And I hate that, because it's no, you're still telling a story. You still need it to make sense. Your characters still need to be in character. So I think that that's a little bit of a cop-out.
Well, there's the suspension of disbelief is a real thing. And the rule that I go by, and that some writers go by, is once you set up the rules of this world, you follow them. So, there's some people who tell stories that are very realistic, and they have to follow what our world would follow in just how it works. And there's some people who establish, their own universe, but once you establish these things in your universe, you cannot bend them anymore. You bent them when you created it. And that's where some people run into issues with something like Harry Potter, because they're, like we were talking about last week with the time turner, like sometimes that's where people start to lose they get the disbelief thing. Suspension of disbelief is when you have, something that just really fits. So for instance, Superman, no one questions him flying. No one goes, that's unrealistic, 'cause people can't fly. But they will question it when he flies and reverses the earth going the other direction to reverse time. Then they go, that's dumb. Well, dude, he flies, and he flies fast, and he shoots heat vision out of his eyes, and he can see through with x-ray vision, and he's super strong.
And he's faster than Barry Allen, right?
In some ways.
He can break the speed force?
Yes, but what I'm saying is that, like, that's where the suspension of disbelief breaks, because no one ever really made it in the world of the movie that was something you do. And people argue that sometimes, but like it's the same thing with the Marvel universe, is like you can have, we have different gods. Matt Murdock is a Catholic, and a Norse god is on the Avengers.
Right.
And there is a devil, and there's Mephisto, and there is a heaven, and there's a hell, and there's, all of these things, and but in our world, that's hard to believe. In Marvel's world, it's an idea of it's all kind of one thing. And so it depends. Like, that's why I'm saying, like, Foggy dying and coming back, I can suspend that disbelief, because there have been weirder things that have happened, even in the grounded level of Marvel. But, Foggy coming back and I don't know, being worthy of Thor's hammer. Like, I don't know. That's kind of like, it depends. You got to tell a story to get you there. I don't know. What I'm rambling about is just the idea that, if you create a world, you can make it as crazy as you want with the ideas and how the world works, and all the crazy mythical ways that it can move. But once you've created it, you have to follow its own rules. You can't add too much to it to break that concept. Best example, like I said, is Harry Potter, I think, where it's just like, you believe there is a killing curse. You believe that there's a magical hat that sorts you into house in a wizard house in the castle. But then, once you start to introduce time travel, that doesn't really quite fit. And, the author obviously says, yes, it does, because look at the story it tells, but look at the repercussions of that.
It breaks it.
Yeah. And then it's like, well, why couldn't they use the time turner to go back and do this or go back and do that? Especially when they did Cursed Child. And they're like, now we're going to go back years. Well,
right.
Why don't you go back and kill Voldemort in his crib when he's, Tom Riddle?
Right.
It's the same thing with Superman, where it's like, well, why doesn't Superman and they make the joke all the time, why doesn't he just reverse the planet and go back in time every time something bad happens?
I saw a meme of Superman saying, I can only use it for emergencies. And it's like me staring at my ice cream cone that fell on the floor. Superman, please.
Yeah, exactly. That's, yeah. And it's the same thing as, like, they introduced in those movies, they don't know the lore of that world because it's never happened in the comics, where, Lois figures out Clark Kent is Superman, and for him to make her forget, he kisses her, and he has a magic kiss that makes her forget.
Aw.
And
Ooh,
like,
that's dangerous.
But it's like, that's
a
not
date rape kiss
that's
right
not,
there.
But well,
that.
then that's a joke in Robot Chicken where he does that, and he kisses Lois and she forgets, and he goes, and it's a montage of him going up to all of his villains and kissing them, so they forget who he is and they don't want to fight him. So he just like goes up to Lex Luthor and like he's like, I will kill you, Superman. He kisses him. He's like, I've forgotten why I hate you. Darkseid's like laying in his bed and Superman's floating above him, getting ready to kiss him. Like,
actually, okay, so I was we have a little toy for our daughter. Quick side. We have a toy for our daughter that's like this little rattle that tells nursery rhymes and stories, or sings nursery rhymes and tells stories. And today she was listening to it, and one of them was Sleeping Beauty. I was like, oh, there's this beautiful princess, and she was put under a curse by someone that was upset because she wasn't invited to her birthday party. And And then she slept for 1,000 years or 100 years. And this prince that had absolutely no idea who she was found this palace that was like covered in thorns and branches. And he opens the thorns, he goes inside and he sees this woman. And she's just so beautiful that he has to like kiss her. He just has to. He's like, man, I'm just going to lay one on her because she is so beautiful sleeping there. And she wakes up and they get married. And then the next story starts and it's Snow White. And it's like this happens. And then she's put under a curse where she has to go to sleep for 100 years. And then like some dude's walking in the forest and he's like, dang, that's a really pretty unconscious woman. I'm going to go kiss her. And I'm like, there's a theme here. And I don't like it.
Yeah.
Anyways, so that's what... Sorry, it just got me thinking about that. Okay, also off topic technically from Daredevil, but earlier what we were talking about, which was the, is it Joss Whedon?
Yeah, Joss Whedon.
Joss Whedon. Jared had said that there's a 6-hour teardown on the Snyder Cut. Have you seen that?
I haven't watched that, no.
Oh, okay.
But that's, I could probably go 6 hours.
You could.
I could probably go 6 hours.
I wonder. So, like, you're not really a sports guy. I know that you watch football, you watch hockey, but you're not like, like right now it's March Madness and you don't have like a roster or anything like that. You're not that dedicated. But I do wonder. I feel like that is something I could be upstairs and I would hear you like yelling at your TV for, on like.
That's one of those that like if I did a video on it, I could like put a whiteboard like that's like the size of this wall and just like I could like write things and like point to them and just
we'll have to get you a whiteboard for your new studio, like a wheel away one.
I'd look so like eccentric with the whole thing because I think I could find a lot to say about that kind of stuff.
Says that the 6-hour teardown sticks up for Joss and his decisions.
See, and I don't, but I understand, if that makes sense. Like I understand how it's not all his fault and I understand why it got there. I think that they did Zack Snyder dirty, and I think that Joss Whedon came in, and I do think that he took some liberties on his own with creative stuff, but like you can't ever sit there and 100% blame someone when there is a movie that was 100% shot or 90% shot, and they go, take this and make it something completely different. Like that's what's going to make it bad. You can't do a cut of The Dark Knight and make it seem campy like the Batman 66 TV series and it will be good. Like it just doesn't quite work that way. So, yeah, that's interesting. That's an interesting side note.
You could always say no.
Yeah, of course you could.
Well,
but you get pretty cocky when you've done the Avengers that made over $1 billion. You do 2 Avengers movies and then you blow it all because then you screw up with Justice League and they don't ask you back. And then apparently you're a creep on set and they don't ask you back. Yeah,
I would say that's more the reason. When you start to make Gal Gadot uncomfortable, and she was kind of Hollywood's golden child for maybe 4 years until recent events.
Kal-El, no.
Kal-El, no.
That was good.
Thank you. I've been practicing. She does it with is it Cheetah?
Yeah.
As well. What's her name?
Well, Kristen Wiig?
Yeah. What's the character's name?
Oh, actually, what is her name? What is Cheetah's alter ego? I was just know Cheetah.
Yeah, I don't remember what her name is, but she does it with her too at the end. She does that same like Cheetah, no. And there's like that weird zoom up on their face when they're fighting. So it's like right here.
Talk about like the most disappointing movie.
I know.
Wonder Woman, like
because Wonder Woman was so
good. Yeah, Wonder Woman 84 was so bad.
Yeah,
it was so bad.
It was
I mean,
good.
I was like offended by that movie, and I don't get offended by superhero movies at all. Like I like Batman and Robin, like unironically for how just a fun, humble mess it is.
See, Jared knows what I'm talking about.
Kal-El, no. Chefs and enough champagne to fill the Nile. That's another one. Well, do we have any other questions, comments, concerns about
Barbara?
The last...
Barbara, no.
Yeah, Barbara Minerva. Gosh, I feel like she's had different names in the comic books.
Oh, yeah?
I can't remember though. I honestly don't care enough. One about that movie.
You're like, I just want to put it out of my memory.
Yeah, and
what would you say is the worst, not including the Hulks, like the original Hulk movies? Actually, sure, let's include those too.
Okay.
What is the worst Marvel superhero movie? Because that's also Wonder Woman. Then we'll go to DC in a second. But
the worst Marvel for me is probably Elektra.
She had her own movie.
The Jennifer Gardner. Yeah, no one even knew it came out. I mean, unless you want to talk about like, some of those like the Trial of the Incredible Hulk, like those movies from the 70s. Those are pretty rough. They have some pretty bad Captain America movies from the 70s as well.
Maybe I should say to the MCU right now.
The MCU right now.
Yeah. So like the early 2000s. So we're not talking about the 70s. And
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably the same. I don't think there is an MCU movie in the actual MCU since Iron Man that like is the worst thing I've ever seen. There's some pretty bad X-Men movies. I thought X3 was pretty bad. Dark Phoenix is pretty. That was the last one they did. That was pretty bad. There's a few. There's a few here and there. Honestly, some of the ones that are unironically fun movies are like Ben Affleck's Daredevil or the Fantastic Four movies from those time. Another one that's really bad is Ang Lee's Hulk from 2004 or something like that. One was really rough for me and a lot of people. Don't really have any plans to watch that one again because it's also super long and kind of boring. Those are probably the ones I can think of.
I've seen none of those.
You wouldn't get through them.
Oh.
Yeah. I can barely sit through. I mean, they're rough.
And what about DC?
DC has a lot. I would probably say like Supergirl from the 80s is really bad. I won't go into like the 30s or 40s. I don't really count those.
I don't think that's fair either to compare them to today's movies.
Supergirl from the 80s. Superman 4 is really bad. Superman 3 is really bad. I think one that a lot of people get offended with that I really do not like is Batman Returns. I think that movie is pretty horrible. I think people just like the aesthetic of that movie, but there's no plot and the villains have there's no arcs. There's nothing. I think that, what was the, Halle Berry's Catwoman is really, really bad.
Oh, I thought she was iconic.
Oh, that movie's horrible.
I don't know who Jennifer Connelly is.
Jennifer Connelly was in, Ang Lee's Hulk. She played Betty. What would you know her from? My favorite movie that she's in is The Rocketeer. That's a classic. But no, DC has a lot because they've made more movies than Marvel. I mean, maybe not at this point, but before like the MCU kicked off, DC.
Isn't that funny that like Marvel was, like DC was the studio.
Yeah, they were bankrupt, Marvel.
Yeah.
And DC was like the golden studio, and they still have the capability to be, and I hope they will again, but they really have fumbled DC for a while.
What's that movie where Batman has nipples?
That's Batman and Robin, and a little bit of Batman Forever.
Oh, really? Did it get cold during that movie?
And it's like German expressionistic ideals for costumes, and I don't know. It was really stupid explanations for it. I unironically like Batman and Robin. It was one of the first. Batman and Robin was one of the first movies I ever saw in theaters, and it's super bad and super campy, but it's one of those that's so bad it's actually really good to watch. It's like so fun to watch that movie as long as you go into it knowing it's not good. It's not like boring bad. It's not like Wonder Woman 84 boring.
But like if you went there expecting it to be really good, you would be furious.
Yeah, exactly. Batman Forever is the one that I grew up watching the most, and I really like that one too. And that one isn't nearly as corny or campy. Batman and Robin was terrible. I wanted my money back. I liked Arnold, and the acting's really bad in that movie. Like really bad. Daredevil, I will say too, with Daredevil with Ben Affleck, going back to Daredevil.
Is that one George Clooney?
Yeah.
Okay.
Daredevil is not a good movie. And when there was nothing else Daredevil related, I thought it was pretty good. Like before the series came out, I was like, it's actually pretty accurate to the comic books in many ways. It's just really early 2000s. Like
everything.
Leather and Elektra like training to Evanescence. And
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, and you got like Ben Affleck like sleeping in a coffin to like Stained music and yeah.
So grungy.
Actually, I wouldn't mind watching that one with you because I think you would be interested in that one enough to get through it, and I think there'd be certain things you'd like about it. And Michael Clark Duncan plays Kingpin, and he's really good. But yeah,
Going under. That's so funny.
it's super edgy, like
I want to watch
dark leather emo. Yeah,
I feel like I've seen like the first 10 minutes or so.
yeah. I don't know. I haven't watched it in a long time either, so I wonder how well it holds up. To be honest, I watched it the last time I watched it all the way through was probably high school.
Oh, okay.
So maybe it's not as good.
You're gonna watch it now and be like, oh, I take back everything I said.
Yeah, Deadpool and Wolverine was pretty good, and that one references a lot of the movies we were just talking about. Like they bring back a lot of those movies that were bad. I mean, Blade was well received, but like Jennifer Garner's Elektra comes back, and yeah, they bring back Johnny Storm from those movies. I do like. I think those are actually pretty good.
Do you think Elektra is coming back into this series?
I don't know yet.
I certainly don't think she'll be back anytime soon.
No, I think they have an idea for it if they can get renewed for multiple seasons after 2. Maybe I would be more willing to say yes. It's hard because I think that Elektra should be something that they should revisit. However, they have too many things going on with the story right now for them to bring her in. It'd be just like season 2 of Daredevil, where it's just like, let's throw Elektra in when
I was gonna say, you mean when they introduced Elektra?
Yeah, well, there's like where they had like the Punisher, and they had his whole case, and then they had Matt going back and forth, and then they had the Hand, and I know she's a part of it, but like they just brought way too much, and so
True.
Yeah, maybe if they get like a season 3 or 4, I could see her, but yeah. I think they'll give her a bit of a break, especially since she was like a lukewarm. People received her a little lukewarm. I think the actress and the way they portrayed her.
Oh, I liked the actress.
I did too. I didn't have an issue with her, but I think that giving her so like stuffing her into a already kind of filled season, and then they do the same thing they do with a lot of superhero movies where her arc is really long and has a lot of nuance to it, and it leads to her death, and the death is it's a big deal. It's like Gwen Stacy, and then they bring her back for good reasons, but it's over a long span of story arcs and different creators and things, and they told that Elektra story in one season. And
then instantly brought her back.
And then, yeah, in like half a season. And then they bring her back in Defenders. And yeah, it's just, I think she will, if they continue the story with Daredevil and they keep doing this version, she will come back. But I wouldn't count on her being around anytime soon.
Okay.
I think that's about it, though. I think that's all we were really thinking about when it comes to
the last 2.
It's hard because it was an overstuffed week for Daredevil episodes because there's 2.
But nothing happened in the first one. We stopped that discussion like 10 minutes in.
There's just not much to talk about. Like I said, I think it was fun because it had some comic nods, and it gave you a different version of Matt from the comics that I really liked, and they did reference some fun things. But it was pretty unnecessary for the season, and I thought the second episode was like it's progressed the most, and it's like it was the best shot, the best. One of the best acted. Like I think it had a really good overall, a good episode that progressed the entire season. So
it did make me want a butterscotch candy.
Oh yeah, that one. See, and like I don't even know what that was too. Like why they wanted to steal that jewel and what that jewel was, and I'm sure it'll come back, but like they just kind of told it and moved on. So I don't know.
Yeah,
we'll have to just wait and see. But if you are watching the replay of this stream, please let us know what your thoughts were on the last 2 episodes of Daredevil.
Hold on. Giant plot hole in that first episode. The blue mask had the key to that box. Just say you want to go take something out. Like, you have the key.
That's true, because he could have just walked in and been like,
hey, I want to get something out of my deposit box.
Did they... There might be an explanation that we missed, because sometimes those are super subtle, like, oh, well, they can't do that because of this. But
Nothing
you're right.
about that episode was subtle.
Yeah, you're right. Because it's like, why didn't he just walk in and go, I have the key, take me back? And then they would have unlocked the safe, and then they would have just both opened it with the keys, and he would act like it was his from the beginning.
That episode should have been scrapped. I'm going to stand by that. And yeah, exactly. And then I know it was like a very campy comic book ending to that, but when he was just like, oh, I think I will take this. Hope he finds the $180 million diamond sitting in his candy dish.
And they kind of shot it in like a CW show a little bit. Like it was shot different. Like I was just about to say that when he lifts the diamond up and they like zoom in on it and then they blur the background and then they show it in the foreground. Like I was like, oh, this is corny. Like it's shot corny.
Yeah.
Like I said, it was fun to see a different kind of version of Matt, like you would see in a comic book, but also, yeah, unnecessary overall.
All right, now I'm finished. You may end the episode.
Yet again, thanks for watching, and we appreciate all the support. We'll see you guys next week with the episode 7 of Daredevil Born Again. We're on episode 7 now, so that'll be fun. Any theories, thoughts, leave them in the comments down below. Otherwise, make sure to follow all of the socials like YouTube and Spotify and all that for all the other podcasts. I did just bring up, we were talking about, I do have a new episode where I interview Justin Criselli, the real Manos. That's a great conversation. He's an independent comic book creator, and it was a good conversation with him. So if Patricia hasn't seen Labyrinth, might want to get on that.
I have.
Oh, okay, there you go. You answered it in the chat.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Well, before we keep rambling, thank you so much. We're going to get some sleep. You get some as well. And we will see you guys next week. So thanks.
Next week.